to the Liberty Podcast with Clint Armitage. We are proclaiming liberty one show at a time, and the next one starts right now. All right, welcome back, everybody. It's Clint Armitage with the Liberty Podcast. Okay, just so you know, I'm going to be paring down these episodes to about 10 minutes each. It may go a little over, whatever, but I'm going to be shooting for about 10 minutes each. I just think that's kind of a better format. That's the way we used to do it. And now I'm thinking, well, we'll go back to that. And I don't know. I just felt like short and sweet would be a little bit better. So anyways, we're going to be paring these down. So if we do 2 in a week, we're going to be doing them at about 10 minutes or so each. They may go a little over, but they'll definitely be under 15 minutes, but about 10 minutes is our goal. All right, so this episode is again the Dark Ages of America. This is part 6, but now we're going to be talking about end times, and we're going to see what Jesus has to say about that, and we're going to look around to see what's going on in the world to see where we're at in the end times. All right, so let's get into this. Now, if a nation refuses to heed God's warning and his shakings, the warnings and shakings are going to become more intensified and more frequent. Now, I'll get into this more as we get into this episode, and we'll talk about the end time events and what the Bible says about it. All right? So, let's start off by taking a look at what Jesus said in Matthew 24. Now, in this chapter, Jesus addresses the disciples' questions about the destruction of the temple and the signs of the end times. Starting in verse 1 in the New International Version, let's read Matthew 24, verse 1. Quote, Jesus left the temple and was walking away when his disciples came up to him to call his attention to its buildings. Do you see all these things? He asked. Truly, I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Every one will be thrown down. Unquote. Verse 3. As Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. Tell us, they said, when will this happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? Jesus answered, Watch out that no one deceive you, for many will come in my name, claiming, I am the Messiah, and will deceive many. You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains. And other translations also include pestilence in there as well. So that's Matthew 24, verses 1 through 8 there, ending with the birth pains. Okay, so let's analyze what Jesus said here. First, he addresses the disciples as they're trying to revel in the majesty of the temple and all of Jerusalem's buildings and all that. Because, since sin entered this world, man has always prided himself on his accomplishments and his workmanship, right? And that's what the disciples were doing right there. They were being proud of the beauty and the magnificence of the temple, and then Jesus basically redirected their thinking by telling them, and probably actually shocking them with information that the temple was going to be destroyed. Right after they were all like, ooh, look at the temple. He came back and said, yeah, it's going to be destroyed. And that obviously got into their minds and got them thinking, because later on they were at the Mount of Olives, and that's when they took him aside privately and they were like, what is going to happen? When is this going to happen? What are the signs going to be, to look for when you come back and when the end of time or the end of the age comes? So Jesus was basically saying not to be deceived by the false Christs and all the people who claim to be him, right? So, we've experienced that in this world, right? We have. And there have been plenty of false Christs since Jesus actually said that. And now we're going to see what else he said in verse 6 here. Verse 6 says, You will hear of wars and rumors of wars, but see to it that you are not alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. All right, so right there, Jesus mentions wars and rumors of wars. Now, have we had wars and rumors of wars since he said this? Yes, we have. right? Gosh, there's a highly televised war going on right now. As we speak, there's a war going right now, a huge one across the world. All right. But he also says that these things must happen. And although, that doesn't really signify the end there, right? And then Jesus goes on to say in verse 7 and 8, this is what he says, quote, "Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these things are the beginning of birth pains," unquote. So obviously, nation rising against nation ties in again with the wars. And then also famines and earthquakes are going to happen in all different places. And like I mentioned before, earlier, the pestilence is also included in there as well in other translations. Now, have we had any of those things since Jesus actually said that? Have we had famines? Have we had earthquakes? Have we had pestilence? Yes, again, that's the answer. Yes, we have. So up until this point, all these events have actually occurred all over the world, and they still continue to occur since Jesus spoke those things. So, and then at the end there, he ends those verses with verse 8. It says, "All these things are the beginning of birth pains." Okay, so we're going to stop right there at verse 8 for now. So, where do you think we are in the end times right now? What's your thoughts? Well, in my estimation, we are in the middle of it. We're right in the middle of it, okay? We're not at the very beginning because he said it back then, and since that time, we've heard all those things happen. So we're not at the very beginning, but we aren't at the end either, because even though all those things happened, the end things haven't happened, and you get to see more of that in the rest of Matthew as we read through it there. But he also said, don't be alarmed, because the end is still to come. And those are the signs of the beginning of the end of the age. Okay, not the end of it, but we got to realize too that things can move quickly. So although we may not be at the end, we can get there really fast. So we have to be aware, we have to be alert. And actually, if you read on, like I said in Matthew 24, what as you continue to read on, you're going to notice that Jesus speaks about other events that haven't happened yet. But when they do, then we're going to be near the end of the age, and we're literally going to be towards the end there. So we're closer to the beginning. We're in the middle of it. We're between the beginning and the end. But what I want to bring to your attention here is what Jesus slipped in at the end of the verse 8. Okay, let's read it again. This is what it says. "All these are the beginning of birth pains." All right. So we've already figured out that we are towards the beginning. We're not at the end. So yes, we are in the last days. So we are in that whole period of the end times and the last days. But we're not at the end of the last days, if that makes any sense. All right? Because in verse 15, if you were to read on here in chapter 24, verse 15, Jesus tells us how to know the end is actually near. Because he talks about the abomination that causes desolation. All right? Quote, "abomination that causes desolation," unquote. Which is basically about the Antichrist. And it also is explained more in depth about what's going to happen in the book of Daniel, in chapter 9 in the book of Daniel. And if you get a chance to study Daniel, that's an awesome study. It's about the last days, and it really gets into some particulars. It's really detailed. It's a little bit complex, but it's really cool. So take a look at Daniel chapter 9 if you want to get into that, and get some references too, because it's a little bit tough to understand if you just read it through. You got to get some help with it. For some people like me, I'm not that smart, so I have to get some help when I actually study through it. So, all right, let's get back to the beginning of the last days here that we're talking about. In verse 8, Jesus says, "All those events are signs of the beginning of birth pains." And that's what I want to really highlight here. Now, you might have some experience with this if you've had children, all right, birth pains. But if not, this may be all new to you. Either way, Jesus is trying to give us a hint here of what to look for and how we can interpret what we see and what we hear in regards to the general timeline of the last days. All right, so again, we're going to be paring it down to 10 minutes, so that's our episode here. So this is Dark Ages of America Part 6.1, and then we'll play the rest of it next time so we can finish off the end times portion of the Dark Ages of America. Until next time, stay safe, stay motivated, and keep seeking liberty. For another episode of the Liberty Podcast with Clint Armitage. If you want to get in touch, email us at info@clintarmitage.com.